Family, friends, and colleagues honor an OPP constable killed in the line of duty.
Greg was very aware of the risks of the job, but he did it nonetheless.
Greg took this job the most serious.
Thousands gathered to pay tribute to Constable Greg Pierce-Hawa as he was laid to rest in Barrie. The young officer shot and killed last week while responding to a call. Plus,
the mayor is asking the lowest income people in Toronto to pay more.
TTC fares might be going up again. After freezing fares for 2 years, John Tory is proposing a 10-cent hike in order to improve safety along the transit system. And
he shoots, that's blocked. Campbell, the chance scores! It's 5-2 Canada.
Another chapter in a storied rivalry being written tonight as Canada takes on the U.S. in the semifinals of the World Juniors. Good evening, I'm Kelda Yoon. A funeral was held today for OPP Constable Greg Pierce-Hawa in his hometown of Barrie. The 28-year-old officer was killed just 2 days after Christmas, fatally shot while responding to a call about a car in a ditch near Hagersville. Ali Chiasson has more on today's service and how family, friends, and the policing community is honoring the fallen constable.
Thousands of police officers from different jurisdictions across Ontario escort the fallen officer's casket. The largest contingent being OPP officers. They lost one of their own last week when Constable Greg Pierce-Hawa was shot and killed during a routine call. Today, at his funeral, his brother and sister tell us more about the man behind the badge.
Greg's wisdom is something that particularly stood out to me. Greg became one of my greatest teachers, and I can't even imagine how much more I could have learned.
Greg was the most courageous person I knew. He was always doing challenging things that he was afraid of. But courage, it's not about never being afraid. It's about doing the right thing despite being afraid. Greg was very aware of the risks of the job, but he did it nonetheless.
The randomness of his death shocked things into perspective for everyone in attendance.
Most of them will have never met Greg in their life, probably never even heard his name before this happened. But he's part of the same family. And every member that comes here today will have probably looked at what happened to Greg and said, my God, that could have been me. He simply went to help someone in a ditch.
My husband's a police officer, he's an OPP officer, so it's a big deal.
I used to serve, ex-RCMP. I was out west for a number of years, and this is important. You have to support these guys.
There have been 6 police deaths across Canada since September. We were in this very spot only in October, covering the funerals for 2 South Simcoe police officers who were shot and killed in the line of duty.
I'm so sorry for your pain. We all grieve with you as you mourn another loss of one of your own.
It's our turn to get after it for Greg, to pick up where he left off, to dig deep, to find the strength, faith, and resilience to carry on.
For those in uniform, that means continuing to serve in his and other fallen officers' honor. For his family, it's still hard to speak of him in the past tense.
Greg died a hero, and he lived as an inspiration. I may have not said it often, but I love you, Greg, and you'll always be my big brother.
Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Barrie.
A live stream of the funeral was held at Caledonia Lions Hall in Haldimand County, where Pierce-Hawa served with the OPP.
Haldimand County, always tries to, when tragedy strikes, we always step up, and that's what we've done here. The community can come and grieve collectively. We can all, get together and share our thoughts and prayers with the family.
To pay their respects to the fallen officer, including the former chief of police of Six Nations Police Service. 2 people have been charged with first-degree murder in connection with Pierce-Hawa's death. Well, police in the GTA responding to 4 collisions involving pedestrians in the GTA today. A total of 5 people were injured, 2 of those critically. Now, the first crash happened just before 3 o'clock near Don Mills in Eglinton. One victim, a man in his 30s, was rushed to hospital in critical condition. The second victim suffered non-life-threatening injuries. 2 hours later, a man in his 50s was struck by a black pickup truck near Lakeshore Boulevard and 1st Street in Etobicoke. He was rushed to hospital with life-threatening injuries. The driver did not remain on scene. And then at 6:15, a woman was struck near Torbram Road and Boulevard Drive East in Brampton. She was transported to hospital with minor injuries. The driver also fled the scene of the collision. And less than 2 hours later, a second person was struck and seriously injured in North York. Now, this one near Steeles and Don Mills. Anyone with information of any of these incidents is asked to contact investigators. Well, 3 weeks after Ontario began allowing pharmacists to prescribe the antiviral Paxlovid for COVID-19, prescriptions for the potentially life-saving medication have more than doubled. Provincial data shared with CBC Toronto shows the number of prescriptions dispensed per day increased by 129% between December 12th and the 29th. But as Ryan Patrick Jones reports, some pharmacies are still lacking access to the medical information needed to fill the prescriptions.
Cabbagetown pharmacy owner Eddie Petrov hasn't yet prescribed Paxlovid, but he's ready to. It would help if the patient is a regular one whose health he's familiar with.
People that I, as a pharmacist, know are definitely a lot easier to help them out because I'm a little bit more aware of their medical profile, their medical history, what medications they're on. Whereas someone that's out of town, I don't necessarily have the same rapport or familiarity with them.
Paxlovid is taken orally within 5 days of symptom onset. While it's safe, it does have a lot of drug-to-drug interactions. It can also cause negative effects if given to people with kidney or liver dysfunction.
Paxlovid is a pretty complicated drug. So from a patient perspective, what you take is very simple once you have access to it. But the steps you need to follow to get to the point that it's safe to prescribe it, that requires a fairly high level of clinical knowledge and understanding and access to information.
Petrov says he can assess patients in part by using an online database where he can see their lab results, blood work, and comments from their doctor. But right now, not all pharmacists use these platforms.
When a program like this goes through, suddenly what was kind of a nice thing to have, it was nice to have lab values before, now you actually need them in order to provide the service. And so you're seeing that this pushes a lot of pharmacies, for example, to play catch up. Maybe they hadn't gotten around to getting access to lab values. Now they realize that they have to have it, but it takes a little bit of time for that to get going.
Grindrod says getting all pharmacies onto these systems is an urgent priority, both for Paxlovid, but also because pharmacists are now able to prescribe medication for 13 common conditions. Ryan Patrick Jones, CBC News, Toronto.
TTC fares may soon be going up again. Mayor John Tory is proposing a 10-cent fare hike in order to pay for safety improvements on the transit system. Municipal Affairs reporter Sean Jeffords has more on the mayor's latest budget promise.
After freezing fares for 2 years, John Tory says people will soon have to pay more to take a trip on the TTC. A single ride currently costs $3.25. The mayor has proposed a 10-cent fare hike. He says it's necessary to help increase safety on the transit system.
I know that nobody likes a fare increase, but I think it does provide the additional funding that will help us to make the investments I'm talking about today and helps us to protect the transit system. And it is a fare increase that is below the rate of inflation.
The increase would see both cash and Presto card single fares rise. Fares for seniors and for Transit Pass users won't increase. The city will also increase its subsidy to the TTC by $53 million to help pay for safety improvements. That includes hiring 50 more special constables and 10 outreach workers.
The TTC has to be a safe place for everyone, every rider, and for every TTC employee. And that safety has to be 24/7.
The head of a transit advocacy group argues that safety must be addressed, but with the right plan.
Special constables aren't equipped to create more accessibility, create a more welcoming environment. So we think safety needs a thoughtful approach There's also safety in numbers. And what's missing from the announcement is a plan to welcome back more riders, to win back more riders with increased service, with lower fares for all.
Pisey Allen says Tory's plan raises fares for people who can least afford it.
This budget appears to contain a fare increase for students and for low-income fare pass discount users. So the mayor is asking the lowest income people in Toronto to pay more.
City Councillor Josh Matlow says now is not the time to hike fares. After a downturn in ridership during the pandemic, he says riders can be drawn back with better quality service.
I believe strongly that the best way that our city will be able to contribute to the quality of life of our residents, to help people get around, to combat traffic congestion and the climate crisis, is to incentivize people with a high quality, well-maintained and affordable transit system. The city already is not doing a good enough job with that.
The plan goes to the TTC board next week. It will ultimately be up to City Council for full approval. The fare hike would take effect in April. Sean Jeffords, CBC News, Toronto.
Meteorologist Colette Kennedy joins us now with a first check on the forecast. And Colette, a rainy one out there today.
Yeah, really a rainy evening for us when things got a bit more organized, and just going to be tapering off now as we get towards midnight and beyond. So we'll see it getting lighter once again, but also some really bad road conditions where we had the areas of freezing rain through the afternoon hours that kind of expanded as we went into the evening hours. So still those rainfall warnings to contend with. And then as you get into the colder sector where it's not so much that mix of freezing rain or ice pellets, that's where we start to pick up some of the snowfall and winter storm issues that you're dealing with there. So some heavier snow of 10 to 20, even 25 centimeters locally. Again, that's more towards the border, eastern Ontario and towards Quebec. Also some advisories just because of the road conditions where you're getting a bit of mixing kind of on this side, so the western edge of that freezing rain and that change to the showers. And then we're getting some colder air that's going to be pushing in. And as that does, and we see this pulling away, okay, maybe the odd sunny break tomorrow, we'll cross our fingers on that one, but any leftover moisture, even though the temperatures are still above seasonal, that will be coming in the form of some wet flurries. So look out for that as well as we go through the day on Thursday. 2 overnight tonight, 1 by tomorrow morning, and then 3 tomorrow afternoon.
Thanks so much, Colette. One of the best rivalries in sports writing its latest chapter tonight. Team Canada versus Team USA in the semifinals of the World Juniors in Halifax, with Canada coming out on top, booking a spot in the gold medal game with a 6-2 win against the U.S. But it didn't start out so promising. Dale Manuktuk was amongst fans tonight and has more.
Pick it up in the first, Canada down 2-0. Cue Connor Bedard. The 17-year-old extending his record set this tournament for most career goals and points by a Canadian, and single points in a tournament with his 22nd. And against the United States, perhaps a little sweeter.
Obviously, big rivalry as well, Canada-USA, and expecting the building to be loud, expect to be a intense game, really competitive game.
Bedard's goal got Canada going. The North Vancouver native has dominated the tournament and is just about all anyone can talk about from Toronto to Halifax.
Connor Bedard is a bad boy, and you know what? Here in Halifax, we claim him, we adopt him.
It's unbelievable how he's carrying the team, and you have how many people in our country that are relying on him, and for him to perform the way he is now, what's he got, 2 points tonight already? Unreal.
Dean moves in.
The home team took the lead in the second period and never looked back.
Once Canada got their legs under them, and Bedard's been such a force for them that once he got that goal, they really rallied behind him, and obviously six straight.
Max Lewis is a spokesperson for the Don Mills Flyers, where 3 of Canada's players spent time, including Brant Clark, who had 2 points in the game.
Someone like Clark, who always was in the right spot, calm, cool, collected, getting the goal, or Othman throwing a hit, Shane making a solid defensive play. It's just so awesome to see them doing that at a young age and continuing their development.
Canada wins it 6-2. Will play for gold tomorrow night here in Halifax.
Dale Manuktuk, CBC News, Toronto.
Come back. As Ukrainian officials describe another wave of violence against civilians, there are growing calls for Western governments to designate Russia a terrorist state. The Ontario government took that step this week. Chris Glover breaks down the implications of that move.
For the first time this week, Ontario's cabinet minister for Ukraine released a statement calling Russia a terrorist state. But what does that really mean, and why is it significant? What is your reaction to the fact that Ontario is now using that language and referring to Russia as a terrorist state?
It's great to see elected officials showing the backbone that's required.
Canada's Ukrainian community has been calling on governments to designate Russia a state sponsor of terrorism since May of 2022, Ontario becoming the first to do it.
It's high time that we call things by their true names. How many dead Ukrainians will it take for the West to show the resolve that's required to deal with this global threat? It's state terror against a democratic people because they've been losing a war that's genocidal in intent. Now, what clearer case could there be?
So clearly important to the community, but Ontario using that language is really symbolic. It would only have teeth if the Canadian government designated Russia a state sponsor of terrorism. What does a state sponsor of terrorism actually mean?
It has both political and legal implications.
Politically, it signals a condemnation of a state's actions. Legally, it can restrict trade and diplomatic relations, and it allows citizens to launch legal action against a designated terrorist state. So far, Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, Poland, and Czechia have done it, but Canada and the U.S. have not. Why would it be that they haven't taken this step?
We have a great strength in the West, and that is that we prefer to negotiate rather than to enter into conflict. And that is a really good thing to have. But the sad reality is that sometimes when you are faced with certain kind of nefarious actions on a scale that Russia is engaging in, there is no more diplomatic room left.
That fear of a terrorism designation ending the chance for a peace agreement is something that Ukrainians in particular are really bristling at.
And this absurd notion that if we label Russia a terrorist state, then there won't be any room for diplomacy. What sort of diplomacy are we talking about? Have we not all understood and realized this is a genocidal war?
Canada has listed 2 countries as state sponsors of terror, Iran and Syria. In 2012, the federal government said it did it to send a clear message that perpetrators of terrorism will be held accountable. How can Canada justify calling Iran and Syria terrorist states, but not Russia?
Iran and Syria are not nuclear powers.
Russia's nuclear capabilities are another reason governments like Canada are reluctant to designate it a terrorist state. But the Ukrainian community insists it is a matter of backbone and time.
Ukraine has to win this war outright. We need to provide the weaponry, and we clearly need to provide the framework, including the legislation, to designate Russia as a terrorist state.
Okay, let's go back to Colette now. And Colette, some slick roads tonight with the rain and the freezing rain.
Yeah, this is the situation we get when we have a frontal system like this. You get some warmer air that overrides cooler air at the surface. So snow in the upper atmosphere then falls into this pocket of warmer air. It melts back to rain or a liquid form. And then just near the surface, it's able to cool down enough that it freezes on contact. That's freezing rain. If there's enough of a layer of colder air near the surface, then it actually freezes before it hits. And those are those ice pellets we get into. So some really some treacherous conditions there. Really more towards the east of the downtown core, and certainly what we're seeing, but still stretching from eastern sections like the nation's capital back towards Peterborough, towards Port Hope, all these regions where you really have that risk through here as we go to the overnight hours. Temps cooling slightly, just enough so that any little light showers are kind of mixing and becoming wet flurries for us tomorrow through the GTA, and searching for the sun. I know we probably all are really looking for it. The Canadian motto wants to give us a few little breaks of sunshine tomorrow. I think there is still going to be a lot of cloud cover. but we might get lucky and see a few pops of it coming through, which would be nice to get because there's not a ton until we get towards the weekend here. So yes, some of that flurry activity setting up, and you can see it becomes a little more widespread later in the day tomorrow and having the impact towards southwestern Ontario by tomorrow night as well, and then still having to churn and work its way through. So going through Friday, not really seeing the sun on that day, are we? Some of that ice accretion, that potential there for some of the buildup as it expands and goes on as we get through the overnight hours, so things will be improving as we go into Thursday. Those overnight temperatures, well, they're not that dramatic, but you will see that change when we were up to double digits in Windsor today, and then so that's a pretty big contrast going down to 1-2 degrees by tomorrow morning. Very little change, though. We kind of come down to 1 degree tomorrow morning for the city, and then by the afternoon we're back to 3 degrees. Normal high, just a reminder again, this time of year is about -2. So we're still on the mild side of things. In fact, all the way through the 5-day period, you're going to find that that temperature doesn't get to that normal daytime high. We do get a better chance of getting into some sunshine, though, come the weekend, and a few chances tomorrow. We'll see how that goes.
Here's hoping. Thanks so much, Colette.
He knew it was a Hyundai. He will add, he bet it all as well. You have $24,000, and now you, sir, have the lead. It all comes down to Lloyd C's response. Did he wager enough? He's smiling. $12,000, taking you to $24,490. Responding correctly to 11 out of
That is the end of a 13-game run for Toronto's Ray Lalonde. But don't feel too bad for him. Going into last night's game, he had already won more than $500,000 Canadian. Pretty impressive. That is our show for you tonight. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you back here tomorrow night at 11. Have a great night, everyone.